So, Alec, I would love to know why you chose to interview me today.
Well, it was a no-brainer. First of all, there was no one else I was really considering. I feel as if all roads lead back to you with my career here. I feel like we've known each other since we were teenagers. We've seen each other go through so many highs and lows, professionally and personally, and I think I always trust you innately. And I really believe if I was stuck on an island, I would drag you with me. If a young ballerina was to come up to you with advice, given all that you know now, in hindsight and in retrospect of your career, do you think it's worth it? What advice would you pass?
I think the question of whether or not it's worth it is very subjective, and it's really dependent on the person and the individual. But to that point, I would say that to the young girl, she should really think about who she's doing it for and why she's dancing, why she's wanting to go to class every day, why is she wanting to show up and continue to put in the work or put in the effort. Because if she's doing it out of necessity, or she's doing it because she is trying to prove something to somebody, or because she was told to, then personally, I would think it's not worth it. That's not going to lead to a long-term joy of the art form.
Yeah.
And with that, it's because we take a lot of criticism, and within all of that criticism, you have to learn how to not let it diminish your own self-worth and your own value, and sense of personhood. And I think that the only way to not let that happen is if you are showing up to your career out of the correct intention of you wanting to be there and you wanting to do it for you.
You start to realize that you have to be doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
Because there isn't always someone there critiquing everything that you do, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes very obvious very quickly whether or not you're doing it for yourself or for the validation of someone else.
Yeah, and I think that too is no longer chasing validation from others and being confident in you and your own sense of self.
Which is hard.
And it's hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it took me 10 years to learn how to not chase perfection.
Brilliance doesn't come from perfection.
Yeah.
You know? It kind of comes from amplifying the things that make you you, and the quirky
Resilience
things and
too.
the resilience.
I mean, all of the exactly. Yeah. Okay. So for you, once you joined New York City Ballet, what surprised you most about the environment?
I think what surprised me was how much initiative I had to take to find my own footing. I think that you had so much riding on this opportunity, and then you get there and you realize okay, now what? You know, I remember the first show being side stage and feeling completely unprepared, but almost in my own self, feeling like there were no teachers around. You know, you learned the steps, you got some corrections, but it was really about sort of diving headfirst and finding your own way. I think it's changed a lot now. I think that the apprentices maybe are a lot more protected and guided. You know, they have the mentors and stuff, but when we got in, it was sink or swim. You know, you just had to find your way. And I think that built a lot of character and a lot of strength, but I think back to myself at that age and I just had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, you hear so many stories, and it's such a company rooted in history, and you walk down the hallways and it means so much, but you also have to try and carve out your own little pocket of existence, which can be very intimidating at a young age.
I think of that. I wonder what was actually going through my mind when we had our first performances, or the first time you learn some featured part, or just the first time you meet these principal dancers you've been watching on the stage. And it's I feel like I didn't quite understand exactly what it all meant or where I was.
That's an interesting segue. Do you think that you met one of your idols or someone that you looked up to and it wasn't what you expected when you were finally in that place of working alongside people or partnering someone? How was that expectation versus reality?
I was, and similar to the question that you just answered, upon getting into the company, I didn't really know how people within the company acted towards each other or how people related to one another. And I found that everyone was very humbly like comfortable with one another and able to just like treat each other as if they've known each other for a long time. Like I feel like when I first got in, it wasn't like, oh, who's this new person that's coming in? You just easily adapt into the room. And I mean, maybe because it was only me when I got in, it wasn't a big group of like 10 apprentices, but I felt that everyone would come up and introduce themselves. And like I had Lauren Lovett saying, hi, I'm Lauren Lovett, as if I didn't know who she was, you know, and I remember that being a meaningful moment of like, oh, okay, these are just people and these are now my colleagues. And there was this kind of mutual respect that I felt amongst people. And I mean, maybe not everyone has that experience, but again, I think that coming in alone, actually really, I benefited from that. And it was in the middle of a season.
Right, so it was like,
and so people were in their own head, or, you know, people were in their own like journey of that season and what they needed to do. And I then also had to just jump right into that. And I think it was a good way to acclimate to the new environment. So in your time at SAB and thinking of like our training and maybe within the company itself, who stood out as someone that was most significant for you?
Jock Soto was really the person that like picked me out and helped me learn a whole new approach to this profession. The way that I was trained was very rigorously like classical, very like refined, and I think like studying under Jock really opened up my scope of what it means to be a dancer, what it means to be a partner, what it means to train differently. You know, his classes were the most athletic, intense, rigorous sort of hour and a half ever. And it was like almost a workout as much as it was about technique. And I think him and Peter Martins and then John Stafford, when he came to teach, they were really fundamental in me understanding my path towards really valuing and appreciating partnering. And it's what I have the most fun doing.
Is there a key piece of partnering advice that you would share with somebody, if you could think of one thing that you hold on to from maybe Jock because he was so significant?
You only look as good as your ballerina feels.
Ah, yeah, that's good. That's
I
good.
think sometimes that, and you can be in the gym for 3-4 hours a day and that won't make you a good partner necessarily. It's coordination and it's respect and communication, and I think that would be something that I would hopefully be remembered for, but also pass down to young dancers is it's okay to engage in dialogue and use your voice, even though it's a silent art form. Like most things in life, it can be solved with communication. And I think partnering is almost like a puzzle. Like you can't approach every ballerina the same. Everyone has a completely different instrument, and it's about fine-tuning it the way that they need. Mm-hmm. And it's always your fault. Even when it isn't, it's always
I remember
the man's
that.
fault. Remember that? Yeah. We were slinging each other around in that partnering class, and it was always my fault.
No matter what, and they'd be laughing in the front of us.
Yes.
I would love to know what it is that you feel you are known for as a dancer. And does this align with what you went into the company thinking?
I believe partnering is a part of like the framework of what makes me me, but I also would hope that it's the way that I connect with whoever I'm on stage with. I think that to me is the thing that I'm most interested in, and the thing that it's obviously hard to watch yourself perform, and the one thing I always sort of commend myself is being present and trying to find those moments where we're not just ballet dancers, but we're humans on stage.
I mean, I feel it dancing with you, the connection that you have with me as we're dancing together on the stage. And I can tell that you're there. You're not just going through the motions. You're not, reacting to whatever I'm doing. It's like we are out there together and we form a relationship out on the stage. And maybe it's because we have a relationship outside of the studio and outside of the stage, but I think it's to you focusing on your character and really
I think that we value similar things as well. Like I'm not super interested in ticking off a bunch of boxes and having 1,000,001 ballets on my rep. Like I love to dance as much as I can, but for me, I would take a singular moment with someone that resonates. And I think back to this past year of Nutcracker when I was coming back from my foot injury, and it was the first time that I had felt really shaken. Like I really was not sure if I could go out there. And I really think one of the only reasons that I got through that was seeing you out there with me. And there was such a calming presence of like the steps didn't matter anymore. It was just you and me. And it was a very healing moment that reminded me of why I do it. And, you know, I think that that's just sort of what, when your values align with the person you're dancing with, like the world disappears around you and you just have this beautiful moment that is yours. And yeah, I love having those moments with people and with you specifically. And
I mean, yeah, I think when I think back to the most significant kind of times within my career thus far, like very few are the times and moments actually on stage. A lot of it is being in the studio collaborating or being in the studio with a choreographer or with a certain partner, and how much I gained through that experience and how much I grew as a person and as an artist and like a human being. And that's what is so like astonishing about what we do is I think it can bring so much depth to us individually, beyond just like artistic growth, but it brings so much personal growth. It's important to let yourself be vulnerable with the work that we do in order to let yourself then grow as an individual.
do you have a type of emotion or type of vulnerability that you find easier to tap into or more difficult? Like I know you just debuted in Swan Lake, which was huge. That sort of like scope of character and emotion.
What's interesting is and maybe you know this, but in my own like personal life, I'm not a very outwardly emotional person. And especially when I was younger, I think I've been able to now articulate my emotions better and show my emotions more vulnerably in my personal life because of actually being at the company and because of portraying characters on the stage. And I think I was more comfortable doing it as a character. And then I learned that they're actually my own vocabulary of emotions that I'm tapping into. And then I was able to see them within myself, that I did have those and I did know what those felt like. And I could then feel them in my personal life and then even more in-depthly bring them to a character that I was performing. And so, I mean, for me, to your question, like fourth act Swan Lake is probably my most favorite thing I've ever danced on the stage, or just ever felt, because it took me to a place that I didn't I didn't know that was there. And I do really like to perform like more heart-wrenching, like gutted emotions. And I'm not sure why, like I'm still kind of wondering that in myself. I have a hard time being vulnerable, like in the second act of Swan Lake. I have a hard time like, letting myself be vulnerable on stage, and not being a little more in control. But when it comes to, fourth act Swan Lake, it was like I was able to just fully let myself feel like this.
Well, there's like a physical exhaustion too.
When you get to that point within the whole, like 3 hours you've been dancing. But I would say sort of a heartbreak, like gutted emotion is something that I really enjoy performing, actually. And I think it's because I'm not thinking about the character I'm portraying. I'm just letting myself feel emotions. And then it's such a fulfilling experience for me.
See, I feel like I'm the complete opposite. Like I'm such an emotional person. And my father is, I'm definitely his son. So for me, like I am on stage tapping into things that I'm feeling in real life. And sometimes I feel like the stage is actually the protective veil that I have. So it's interesting that polar opposite. And then we meet in the middle somewhere.
And then when we're together on the stage. Okay, another one for you. Okay, I'd love to know, through your time, whether it was through training or your career in New York City Ballet, what are a few lessons that you've acquired that you carry with you into the rest of your life? And with that, is there a motto that you live by?
Yes, and I want to articulate these well, but you don't make history by replicating it. That's like a big one. It's always someone's first time in the audience. You know, when you're knee deep into a Nutcracker run and you're trying to find inspiration, I think it's important to remind yourself that someone out there is seeing the ballet for the first time. I also think that in terms of a motto, what always stays with me is how you treat people on the way up will be either the cushion or the concrete, you know, that's there when you come down. And it's...
Where'd you just, or what made you, is there a moment that had you have that realization, or what
Yeah,
led
absolutely.
you to
I think
discovering
that
over time, or was there like one moment?
I think both. I think that we've all felt that. I mean, you and I have both felt that high, right? When you're either learning a bunch of stuff or you're dancing a bunch of stuff, and you get all of the validation, and it feels great. And you know, I've seen some really harrowing situations of people losing themselves to that, and being surprised when that support isn't there. When, you know, it's important to be grateful for everyone that helps you thrive and achieve what it is that you want to do. And that includes, you know, the production and the costume department. Like, so many people put so much incredible craftsmanship and work into what goes on for us to be on stage and to be able to do what we do. And I think it's just that. I think acknowledging that work and being appreciative of that work also makes it lighter. It makes it feel more important and less self-servicing.
Yeah, I think that's so much of what we do can be self-servicing,
Right.
and we can feel almost isolated in our own journey and in ourself, and it gets so consuming, and being able to have that perspective and step out of yourself really benefits you and allows you to have a clearer mind and journey moving forward.
Let's talk about pet peeves. Do you have any personal pet peeves? Do you have professional pet peeves?
The first thing that comes to mind is
This is the question I'm most excited about.
would be well, this doesn't really apply to you, but time management is a big thing in the workplace and in personal life as well. And I think being on time for me is very important, and it could be because I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive, but
You?
know,
Never.
just a little bit controlling in that way. Another one though that I've found, and it relates to what we were just talking about, but it would be mutual respect, whether it's between colleagues in the studio, like you and your partner, or if there's a principal alongside the corps de ballet, if it's the person in the front of the room and the way that they're leading the room of dancers, a choreographer, having mutual respect between everybody, I think is huge. And when I see that that's lacking, or I see that there's a lack of appreciation for everybody's work and for what everyone is bringing to the table,
Then they better watch out.
they better watch it.
No, but also like I
But
feel like
it's-
it brings the best product out.
Yes,
I always
absolutely.
with the choreographers and stuff. I'm
Yeah.
always like, you would get so much more out of the
Yeah.
room.
But also in the room, you need to be open. I've been
Totally.
in experiences where the dancers alongside me are not very open to the process. And I mean, it's hard when you have people coming in that, you know, and not everyone is everyone's cup of tea. And so but you have to be just willing to open yourself up to the experience and the process. Like, it's 30 minutes of your life, or it's, you know, and I say this when I go out on stage to do something hard, it's 10 minutes of my life, and like, I can get through it. Like, I worked hard to be able to do this. But yeah, I think just having a respect for everyone goes a long way.
Yeah.
And it brings kindness, and if you're complaining, then everyone else around you is going to start complaining, and it puts everyone in a negative space.
That's contagious.
Yeah, it's very contagious. So I would hope too that, like, when I'm in the studio, I bring that, or I strive to be an example of that. I mean, something that I've learned through our career is you have to be adaptable, you have to be coachable, and you have to be able to work as a team. And if you can't do those things, then your experience is going to be
Very isolating.
tumultuous. It's going to be isolating, and people aren't going to want to work with you. You won't have good relationships. Yeah, so.
And it does require, this career requires helping people, because when you when you help people through those hard moments, it does come back. And when you need something or you need a shift a show, you know, you never know when the pendulum's going to swing backwards. And
Kindness goes a long way. Kindness. Okay. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your injury. And I know that you've gone through a serious injury and recovery process, and you spoke a little bit on kind of mentally how you've overcome that, but I'd like for you to dive a little bit deeper into that. Like, what helped you endure that process, and what did you learn about yourself? And like, how did that maybe lead you to discover more about your sense of self, your personal value through the experience?
I had sort of a few injuries, and interestingly, once they started, it was sort of they would come back a little bit more like commonly. But my first big injury was I tore my ACL and meniscus in my knee at the end of the pandemic. So when it rains, it pours, and everyone was coming back to work, and I was maybe 6 months behind. And that was sort of the first time where I had really had to understand the pace in which we function as dancers. Everything is so high speed, and especially at New York City Ballet with our like dense rep, you know, there's such a quick turnaround. And I just found myself still and stuck. And, you know, with that came a whole new perspective and appreciation for what the body is able to do and come back from. I will say, however, there's not a day when I'm not sort of there in the back of my mind expecting sort of or worried about something happening. And I sort of worked really hard to overcome that. And then when I broke my foot last summer, I had just been promoted. And it was literally the week after we were up in Saratoga, and I landed the most, it was like I was running, like a high run, not even a pony. I didn't even get the gratification of doing a pony. It was a single run. And I just heard this crack, and I just went into like autopilot. I had known what worked the last few times. And, you know, for me, when something like that happens, I have to look outward and I have to focus on other things that fulfill me, because it's just a reminder that, you know, it's inevitable for all of us that we won't be able to do this for the rest of our lives. But it's hard. It's hard to sort of balance that physical rehabilitation, because, you know, you're putting pressure on yourself to get back, because that's really what you want as quickly as you can. And sometimes you forget to rehabilitate the mind. And I think now that I'm a little bit older with this past injury, it's been more difficult actually, because I have planted those roots in other facets of my life. And, you know, you just, it's sort of a very humbling experience, and it makes you appreciate lots of things. A lot more.
Not only our job, but I guess,
I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it's the first thing I say to people when they do have something like that is look outwards. This will come back. This will be waiting for you.
Learn a lot about your body in the process, and health and taking care of yourself, which I think is a huge silver lining of that experience. And and I guess finding, like, realizing that your identity is not wrapped up to being a dancer with the New York City Ballet. Like, you are so much more than that, which sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's true, because we can lose sight of that so quickly.
And the thing is, it kicks back in, like, it's so innately who we are. And actually, I think it's very easy to hide behind the shield of, you know, you step out into the world and you say that you're a New York City Ballet dancer, and it's just the most exciting thing that someone can connect with you over. And, you know, when you don't have that, or when you're injured and, you know, you are still a dancer with New York City Ballet, but you have to start being like, well, what other facets make me interesting? What makes me interested in, you know, in whatever else is going on in my life? And I think back to that Nutcracker performance, because it was a moment where, I don't know if you, I mean, you must remember, I was so like, I don't know if this is going to happen. And you were
the whole process was a little like that.
And I just hadn't experienced that. And I like was so grateful that it was you with me. But, you know, that was just a different thing for me to.
I mean, you have to trust yourself when you come back too, trust your body, trust yourself. And
you're partnering a ballerina, you know, you're lifting her above the head. And that was where I think I started to doubt myself, I was like, I know where I'm at, but am I strong enough to like support
take care of someone
human?
Else? And
if I'm not, then I have the responsibility to remove myself. And
I think that's interesting too, to go into with when we're in the studio, what do we hope to bring,
Yeah.
rather than just like our artistry, but I think, and consistency, of course, but that support and encouragement that you have with your partner, I think is really important, because if you're in there with somebody that is giving you nothing, it's really hard to put yourself out there on that stage with that person.
Right.
And
And,
so,
I've been on that end of
other-
it where I have been like, whoa, okay, like this is me and this is them, and we will be out there doing our jobs, but we are them. We are separate entities. And I think back to, that process was just great, because you were like, well, what are you going to do? Not do it? And that's, you might not think that you have an emotional depth to you necessarily, but sometimes that's good. I think that is what got me there. And then I got off stage and I was like, okay, we're back, baby.
Yeah. Also, you're like, let's do it again.
But also I had to flip. Remember, I had to flip the manege to the other side, so I was going to the left.
The day before. Yeah.
It was just like I felt like I was like
where am
balancing
I?
different plates, and it all happened.
Also, you realize what we do. We don't have to put so much pressure on ourselves with going out there. And yes, we're performing for thousands of people, but
we're also in a mint green tunic and white shirts.
Exactly. It's okay. You got little sugar plums on your costume, gumdrops, but no, it's not. We don't have to put so much pressure on ourselves all the time.
I do remember the feeling though, of that big cymbal crash and those jetés, which I love doing, and I just felt so back.
Yeah, that's great.
But
it's an amazing feeling,
right?
though.
There's no wood around.
No, there's
knock on glass.
I've never had a severe injury. I mean, the older I get, the more I'm realizing that my body has aged from our career, and the chronic pains are there. I mean, there's nothing that I've experienced so far that has taken me out, but I mean, I wake up in pain every day, and you realize that this is where my body is now. It's been doing this for, since SAB, it's been doing it for 13, 14 years. And so it's a lot of demand. But, you learn the discipline and the resilience. I wanted to know, number one, how you feel that growing up in Australia has shaped your identity as an artist and as a person. And do you see parts of yourself that are different than others within this cultural environment because you grew up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I moved from Australia to another country when I was 17 years of age, which in hindsight is insanity. Mm-hmm. But the thing that stayed with me is my sense of humor and my lightness. I try to just keep calm, and I feel like that sort of chill attitude feels very inherently Australian. But it's all about my family. I feel like everything I do is for them, and it's hard. It's still sort of the one thing that stays with me is in the pit of my stomach is this fear almost of that's just so far away. It takes 20 hours. So I'm fearful of those things as I get older and my family gets older, and I try to do everything here and dedicate everything I do to them. But I don't necessarily think it's different than others. I just think it's about what you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. And I hope one day that I can my nieces and nephews and everyone will help me see that it was worth it, that it was for something. It was for my own version of a legacy. I'm always homesick, though.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, your parents come out here a couple times.
But I'm so if I could, I would move back in with them.
Yeah.
Probably not. But you know what I mean? And you're similar. Family is everything.
Family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, I feel like we should do your show and tell. So you brought a little guest with us.
Honestly, this is a guest because there is so much life in this piece
Let's hear the story behind
history.
This very significant piece of rehearsal
piece of archival history. This shirt was...
You're no longer talking to me, you're talking...
Oh, sorry, I broke the fourth wall. Let me readdress. No. So when I got into the company, I opened up the locker, which is not assigned to you, just sort of pick. And this dusty shirt was just waiting for me. And naturally, I put it on, and it has been with me.
Did it smell? Was there
It still smells.
Yeah. I'm okay.
But as you can see, it's so tattered and worn. I've re-sewn it multiple
many
times
times.
because I refused to buy a new shirt. It's just like a pajama shirt.
We don't know who's it
No,
was.
so if there are any New York City Ballet alumni out, this is the PSA for you to claim the shirt, although I won't be returning it. I'll be passing it on to someone when I retire one day.
By leaving it in the locker?
Yes.
Yeah.
But actually, everything that I wear has to have some sort of cut or tether.
Yeah.
I just need it to feel...
Or mismatch.
Something.
Like leg warmers are mismatched.
Yeah, I don't know.
those-
I've tried different aesthetics over the years, and you and I have complete opposite ones. You love a clean, like I love
A
everything.
little less refined.
A little less refined. But yes, I will always put this on when I'm just wanting something that feels comfy, but also, the chest is there. And
Yeah. It's
so that's my significant.
nostalgic.
If you ever want to borrow
I
it,
love it.
throw it on.
Next rehearsal we have together.
You'll wear it.
Great.
Was that okay?